In the era of 3D gaming, there were so many great games in the 5th generation that I didn't get to play all of them, one of them being Tomb Raider. Tomb Raider originally released on October 25th, 1996, and seeing as I was only just 1 year old, it's pretty understandable why I didn't get to spend much time with the world-famous adventurer Lara Croft. Now, I did play Tomb Raider a little bit, but I think it was when my dad rented it and a few times at a friend's house. My dad rented it thinking that it would be a positive game for my sister. And, at the time, Lara Croft was looked at as a cool character for both girls and boys. So it made perfect sense why he would get it, but the tank controls just wasn't my thing. I do remember Tomb Raider looking graphically impressive, but I couldn't get past how it felt to play. I became more familiar with Lara Croft with the 2013 reboot. At the time, many people enjoyed the reboot, but felt Lara as a character was drastically different, and accused the developers of ripping off Naughty Dog's Uncharted. I love Tomb Raider 2013, but I always wanted to go back to the roots of it all. Sometimes you gotta go back to the past in order to appreciate the future, As of today, it's no secret that Lara Croft has become a cultural icon. She's arguably one of the most popular video game characters of all time, but if I had to limit it to just female characters, she's probably number one. So the inner gamer in me began to call out, and I had to see for myself what was so great about Tomb Raider and why Lara Croft became who she is today. And there's no better time to step into the shoes of the sensuous heroine than with the Tomb Raider Remastered on the PS5. It feels like I'm coming full circle playing this game during PlayStation's 30th anniversary. With a new coat of paint and modern controls, I'm sure this classic game will still hold up, right? Now, anyone that knows anything about movies can tell that Tomb Raider clearly was inspired by Indiana Jones, with both of them being archaeologists and treasure hunting adventurers. Like any great origin story, Lara's adventuring ways came about through a tragic circumstance. Growing up sheltered and rich, she finds herself stranded as her chartered plane crashes in the Himalayas. She was left to survive all on her own, and this experience opened her eyes to a new world of adventure. She came to realize that being a part of the British elite really isn't her thing. Seeking that sense of adventure that she experienced when she was stranded, she began to travel the world, studying ancient civilizations and discovering new places and people. Of course, her family wasn't too fond of this new sense of independence, and they began to disown her. In order for her to continue adventuring, she needed some money, so she ended up funding her lifestyle by writing down her adventures in novels. Thankfully, all her hard work paid off, and now she lives comfortably in her luxurious mansion.
The main hall. Sorry about the crates. I'm having some things put into storage and the delivery people haven't been yet.
In order for Lara to survive these crazy adventures of hers, she needs to be well equipped. Miss Croft is extremely agile, allowing her to jump long distances, swim through deep waters, and climb to unreachable places. Now, Tomb Raider can be described as a platformer. Unlike most games in the genre, Lara has a sense of weight to her. She doesn't stop on a dime like you would think. Once she gets going, you have to take into account her momentum and the height of each jump. This makes controlling Lara feel more realistic, well, as realistic as a game could be from 1996. Every movement you do with Lara feels deliberate. Even a single step must be considered, or it could lead to your death. There is definitely a learning curve to Tomb Raider. Again, this is kind of strange for most platforming games. Unless you've never played a game before, I would assume the time it takes for the average person to understand and feel comfortable playing a platformer would probably be pretty short. Maybe only a few levels you'll get it down packed, and after that it's all about executing the same thing over and over. For me, however, it took me a while to understand the mechanics behind Tomb Raider. Lara Croft has so many different jumps, it's kind of ridiculous. Lara can jump straight. She can long jump forward, hop forward, flip from side to side, backflip, hop back, and roll on the ground and even in midair. Lara is quite the acrobat, and every move in your arsenal has a purpose. But if you don't get the basics down, doing anything fancy will be out of your reach. Which brings me to probably the bane of my existence in gaming, tank controls. Tank controls are not my friend. I understand that for the time period, analog controls weren't standard yet. Heck, the Sony DualShock didn't even release till 1997 in Japan, and then it didn't even release in America till 1998. So relying on the D-pad was the only thing developers' core design had to work with. For those who don't know what tank controls are, basically that means your character moves like a tank. Lara can only move forward and backwards. If you press the side buttons, she'll just simply rotate in each direction. This definitely will be confusing if you are used to games where moving the character in any direction causes them to automatically turn around and face that direction. Classic Resident Evil uses tank controls and is actually one of the main reasons why I never liked those games. But Tomb Raider did something weird. It actually opened my eyes to something. Tank controls, when used properly, actually can be fun and intuitive. Now, Tomb Raider Remastered does offer modern controls, but I decided to stick with the tank controls because I wanted to know how the game was meant to be played. And to my surprise, not only did I prefer them, but I began to wish more games would use tank controls today. You may be asking yourself, what's so great about some clunky movement? Well, like I said, the game was designed from top to bottom with these controls in mind. Lara runs by default, but there is a walk button to slow her down, and it also prevents her from walking off ledges. Playing the game with the D-pad, I knew exactly where Lara would be. And once I learned the distance of each of her jumps, I could easily rely on this slower but more precise movement system. Now, what about the mod controls? They unfortunately aren't the best here. Now, don't get me wrong, it is playable, and for anyone that just simply refuses to use tank controls, it's serviceable. The problem is that Lara just feels too loose. Which sounds good, right? I mean, you would want the character to feel more fluent, but then you'll be removing the weighted feeling that Lara is supposed to have. She just feels too light, in my opinion, which takes away from the original feel of the game, and trust me, that feeling is important. Not everything should be changed in a remaster. See, one thing I love about Tomb Raider is the level of tension it has in its platforming. Now, sure, there are moments in every platformer where things could get intense, but with Tomb Raider, it's almost every single jump. By combining the weighted feel of Lara, the slow but precise tank controls, and the level designed around these systems, giving what would be a simple jump in any other platformer, feels like a greater accomplishment here when you stick the landing. I would hold my breath at certain jumps, as you have to get Lara's speed just right. Then you have to get the feel of the jump. The length of the jump is also important because you can overshoot it. Or, rather than not, I should put my arms out to grab a ledge, as sometimes that's all you can do to just make it. For contrast, let's compare, Tomb Raider to another game. You may have heard of it. I don't know. It's called Uncharted or something. Now, my boy Nathan over here, he feels free. Moving him around feels like butter, but it's actually kind of weird when you think about it. Despite him being more detailed than our PlayStation 1 icon, he actually feels more like a video game character than our polygon treasure hunter. Uncharted uses graphical set pieces to add a sense of scale and adventure. Drake will jump as far as he is coded to, depending upon the gap he's facing. In contrast, Lara has a set length to her jumps, and the level designers kept this in mind. So, in a way, Uncharted has auto correction to its jumps, and Tomb Raider, it's 100% on you. Makes sense, right? I mean, women do have to work twice as hard as men. You didn't time your jump? Do it again. Overshot your run up and fell? Do it again. Forgot to reach out to grab a ledge? Do it again. Did the wrong kind of jump, bumped your head and broke lower spine? Reload and do it all over again. This makes every platforming challenge feel challenging, actually. That's the best way to put it. I never worried if Drake would fall because it's all on rails, and that's okay, actually. Because, you see, Uncharted was made to wow me visually, while Tomb Raider was made to push my skills and overcome the odds. It made me feel like I have control over a true hero. Plus, modern controls take away most of Lara's acrobatic moveset. I don't feel like a cool action hero when all I'm left with is an awkward way of jumping. Like, look at this. Like, which one of these look better? Modern controls or tank controls? And no, I'm not trying to make it look bad. This is just the best way to handle this platforming challenge since Lara is neuter in this mode. It's doable, like I mentioned, but clearly, tank controls here is the winner. Tomb Raider is far from a cakewalk. This is a 90s game after all, which means there's no hand-holding. You should treat every failure like it's a lesson. Death teaches you to rethink your steps and find a proper solution. Thankfully, not every mistake ends your life. Some just set you back, make you try over and over again to get the hang of the game's physics. I spent so much time with this one jumping segment alone, just trying to get it done smoothly. Tomb Raider really sparked that flame in me that most games don't do today, which is it made me really want to get good at the game. It wasn't just enough to get by the levels, I wanted to actually master them. To pull off each move with style and grace like Lara would actually do. The first challenge is understanding Lara's moves. The game does provide a tutorial, which is in the form of Lara's home. Here you can learn the basics. Although this section is cool, many details are left out because it's a 90s game. See guys, way back in the 90s, we had this innovative thing. They were called game manuals. These mythical game manuals will add extra bits of lore, have tips in them, and even explain the controls. Meaning developers felt no need to make a tutorial stage back then. Making Tomb Raider pretty rare when it comes to that. But because of this, some things aren't explained in-game. Oddly enough though, the Remastered team could have easily added the book digitally into the game itself, but I guess they wanted us to suffer? Even with the knowledge of the instruction booklet, I still couldn't get the hang of the jumping. Lara would just fall off the damn ledge even though I pressed the jump button. I felt like the game was messing with me, playing with my mind, making me feel crazy. Then it hit me. See, I dabbled in some game development myself. I made my own platformer, and one technique found in platformers is what I call edge forgiveness. That basically means if a character is no longer under a solid object, you get a few seconds to jump even though technically you're jumping off of thin air. I tested out my theory and I was correct. You wouldn't be able to tell as it does look like I'm jumping last second, but in real life, if I tried this, I would be headed straight to the dirt. This was a helpful realization, but still Lara wouldn't jump even when I pressed the button. So what the heck is going on? See, Tomb Raider has a momentum system. Lara needs to build up speed in order to do a long jump. These small platforms do give you enough room to build up speed, but I just didn't know how much. By starting from the end of a block, then running and jumping, it would always give me enough room to make it to the other side. But I found that there was another way as well. If you walk to an edge of a block, Lara won't fall off as long as you're holding the walk button. If you then let go and then hop backwards, that right there is enough distance to just make it across if you time your jump correctly. Learning this was satisfying, and the cool thing is the challenge never went away. Now that I was equipped with the knowledge, I had to now execute. So Tomb Raider started off with the challenge being understanding what to do. But as the game goes on, now it's about applying my skills that I've learned over my adventure. Tomb Raider gives you countless situations to put your skills to the test, and it never gets old. Now, what's a great explorer without having some handy tools? For Lara, she relies on her twin pistols, but gets more weapons throughout her adventure. Now, let's be real here. Combat in Tomb Raider is fun, but it's clearly not the focus. Combat boils down to drawing your weapon, pulling the trigger, and moving around to avoid attacks. That sounds like a basic description of any shooter that ever existed, but here it's really that basic. Tomb Raider uses a old school lock-on system. There's no cursor on the screen or anything. You have to rely on your visual aid, which I think is cool because to know which enemy Lara is actually aiming at, you just simply have to look at your screen and see the direction she's pointing, instead of having a bright, colorful cursor, which does actually make the game seem more realistic than others. Once you're locked on, all you gotta do is pull the trigger. You can even hold the fire button down as Lara never stops shooting. Reloading isn't a thing here at all, so you don't have to worry about that either. If you're used to more modern day third-person shooters where you actually have to aim for yourself and all that, this could sound boring, but at the time, this was all we needed, and in a lot of cases, is all they could do. Besides, even though it seems simplistic, there is some strategy to the combat. For starters, let me justify the auto-aim mechanics outside of the game just being old. Remember all those cool acrobatic flips Lara could do while platforming? Well, you could do them while shooting your guns. It's much more intuitive to do it with the tank controls, as like I said, the game was designed around them. So if you do use the mod controls, you will mainly be circling around these beasts, and yeah, it's as boring as it looks. Jumping and flipping works the same as it does when you have your weapons holstered. So you could take your platforming skills to combat. Flipping around while shooting makes Lara look like a true badass. Everything about this screams 90s cool. Now granted, there are times where the slow tank controls can make combat look awkward, but as you gain more practice, you'll be able to bounce around and make your enemies your plaything. Heck, one thing I learned recently is that Lara could actually jump roll. Now I always knew there was a roll button, but I didn't know you can use it in midair. The roll button in this game would be equivalent to like a quick turn in any other game. But the cool thing is, while you're being chased by your enemies, you can jump, roll in midair, and turn around and just start firing at them. This stuff is just way too cool, and you don't see this in most games today. As far as guns go, Lara has 4 different options. She has her default dual pistols, a deadly shotgun, dual magnums, and twin Uzis. Clearly, Lara likes her guns in pairs, and who could blame her? Why have one pistol when you can have 2? Each weapon does have its own pros and cons. The dual pistols have infinite ammo, but are the weakest of all the guns. They may be weak, but you'll always be able to rely on them. The magnums are a slightly better version of the pistols. However, you don't have infinite ammo and you have to find ammo as you explore around the map. If you do have ammo for your magnum, I'm going to always tell you to go with that over the pistols. Like I said, the pistols are more like a default weapon. You can always rely on them, but when you want to just get rid of some enemies quickly, go for your magnums. The shotgun is the most powerful gun available. It being a pump action, Lara can't shoot as fast as her pistols, but the damage makes up for it. It kills enemies in just a few hits. The game balances the power of the shotgun with the fact that ammo for it is pretty rare and hard to find. A little pro tip is to save your shotgun ammo for when you really need it. Now, the Uzis have the fastest fire rate. Ammo isn't hard to find and damage is the same as the basic pistols, but they shoot so damn fast that they're the best all-around gun in my opinion, which explains why you don't get them to the end of the game. Now, there's a cool visual feature with the dual weapons that actually plays a role in how you deal damage. See, when Lara locks on to her enemies, of course they're going to move around and whatnot. Now, depending upon the direction in which the enemy is and where Lara is facing, Lara may aim both of her guns at the enemy or just one gun. This small detail is actually important, as if you're only aiming one gun at the enemy, you're going to do less damage than you would if you were aiming both. So you have to also keep in mind where you are when it comes to your enemies. You need to dodge out the way to avoid damage, but you also, in some instances fighting difficult enemies, want to hurry up and reposition Lara in a way that she can use both her guns at the same time, increasing your maximum damage. You can always reposition yourself, but if you are up against multiple guys at once, it's better to lock on to someone else. To do this, you have to stop firing, then fire again. If you ever wonder why you were shooting at a dead enemy, that's because as long as you're firing, Lara will stay locked on to that character. This is similar to the Z targeting system found in Zelda games. It's funny, now that I think about it, Tomb Raider came out before The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. So maybe Tomb Raider's targeting system inspired Zelda's. All this talk about gun action, who are we shooting at exactly? Lara Croft may be the first person to ever have beef with the whole animal kingdom. From rats to lions to apes to bears, by the end of Lara's adventure, she probably put down half the Earth's population of animals. If I had to guess, PETA isn't the biggest fan of our bodacious heroine. She even kills a freaking T-Rex. There are human enemies too. Mercenaries hunt you down, and for the most part, they just run around and shoot at you. As long as you don't stand still and eat lead, you'll be perfectly fine. Same thing with animals, but the animals are a lot more trickier because they rely on rushing you down and they run in packs. So in tight spaces, that could be trouble for you if you get bombarded by a bunch of lions. Then we have the Atlanteans. These things are fast, powerful, can do both range and melee, and as far as every other enemy in the game, has the most intelligent AI. You will need to stay on your toes at all times with them. Keeping your distance is ideal, as a few swipes can take you out, and always save your most powerful ammo for your toughest foe. I mentioned that some guns need ammo. Ammo is one of the few things that you'll be collecting throughout your adventure. Med packs can be found both big and small to obviously help heal Lara right on up. These items at times can be right in front of your face, but many are off the beaten path, requiring you to complete some type of puzzle or platformer challenge in order to get to them. There are even secret areas in this game, similar to how like the classic Doom games are, and these can lead to more ammo and med packs, but every now and again, you might even get a gun earlier, so keep your eyes peeled. For me, however, when it comes to finding the secret locations and stuff like that, outside the guns in general, just finding more ammo and med packs really wasn't all that great to me. Now that sounds bad on paper, but it's not that bad because one thing I could say is anytime I've ever found a secret, the challenge to get to the secret was fun. The reward for finding them was an afterthought. It's kind of like when you really like your job. When you really love your job, you'll do it probably whether you get paid for it or not. The pay is nice, but you're really doing it for the love of the work. That's what it's like to do these challenges in order to find these secrets. Now, our girl Lara Croft may be a great adventurer on paper, but until you become a great player, Laura's going to find a one-way ticket to heaven. Dying, like I said, should be a teachable moment. Although I died many times, I never felt that death was unfair or cheap. Well, okay, some deaths are cheap, but I wasn't upset about it. Tomb Raider released in a time where devs felt no need to hold your hand. If you played the Souls games, you may have heard the term get good. Tomb Raider is one of those games, but not in an annoying way. In fact, the times I got trolled by the devs, I just laughed about it. Lots of traps will take you out instantly. Spikes, boulders, and falling from high places all can put you in the morgue. Now I gotta say here, the devs behind this game might be sick individuals. I mean really sick people. The details in the deaths are subtle, but somehow made me cringe compared to more gruesome games today. I don't know, man, it's just something about how she screams and the sounds of her body flopping that just adds to the disturbing nature of it all. Like, there's even a trophy to find every way Lara could die. Like, what's wrong with these people? Like, what's going on? Thankfully, Tomb Raider allows you to save anywhere. So if you're unsure of your skills, before you take that leap of faith, how about you save before you find yourself face first in a pit of spikes? Now, I gotta tell you, there is no autosave. So if you've made it to an entirely new level and you die, you gotta reload whatever your last save was, which means you could possibly have to play the previous level all over again. Now, this all sounds horrible, I'm sure, to most modern day gamers, and let me tell you, I like autosaves myself, but because I've also played on PC and I'm a little bit older and I've been gaming since I was a kid, I have played my fair share of games where there is no autosave and the game just allows you to save anytime, any place, anywhere. PC gamers would know what I'm talking about. This is very common on that platform. So for anyone unsure, just save anytime you feel you need to. Save after everything you want to do. And it's pretty easy to do, seeing as it's just one button away. Click of the analog stick, you're in the save menu, you're in, you're out, it's good. One odd thing is that New Game Plus uses save points. When I saw this gem, I assumed it was some secret. It's just a save point, which is how the game worked on the PlayStation 1. Why they gave New Game Plus save points is beyond me, but I think it's kind of cool. In New Game Plus, you're able to play the game basically how you did on the PlayStation 1. Give you that classic feel. Tomb Raider is made up of 4 worlds broken up into 15 levels. The time in which you spend in each level is based upon your skills and how many times you die, and I died a whole lot. Also, puzzles can stump you, especially in the late game. They really ramp up the difficulty there. Each world has its own unique themes, enemies, and challenges. Lara visits Peru, Greece, Egypt, and Atlantis. You can imagine the kinds of places Lara will raid. Ancient cities, Egyptian pyramids, different ruins and caves, and shockingly, a part of the world lost to time where dinosaurs roam free. Tomb Raider isn't afraid of blending realism and fiction to create fun levels for the player to explore. For the most part, the design of each level is straightforward. You can get stuck by missing a puzzle or a lever, but the worlds aren't that big. So I never needed to Google my way out of a sticky situation, as a simple retracing of my steps will lead me to the exit. If you want though, you can cheat your way forward. It's good that this game came out in 96 because you get to experience the greatness that is cheat codes. Something that's been lost to time at this point. Each level has its own set of puzzles and platforming challenges. There are some levels that place you in a big room and around you are challenges in smaller rooms that you must beat in order to progress forward. Levels also have themes based upon the type of puzzles you'll be facing. One of my favorite areas was actually like this water temple where you have to pull these levers and make the water level rise and fall. Kind of similar to Zelda, Ocarina of Time's water temple. But this came out before Zelda Ocarina of Time, so maybe Ocarina of Time took from Tomb Raider and... Let me stop before the Nintendo community comes after me. I felt levels in general were easy to read and overall well made, but some of them do have some, odd design choices. A later level had me stuck in a room with a giant sphinx. I knew I needed keys to move on, but I couldn't figure out where they were. Only to realize that these rock formations on the edge of the stage are meant to be climbed on top of. Another level that had a sphinx also had me going crazy because I'm in this small room, there's dead ends everywhere, and I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I ran around all over the place only to realize later that behind the Sphinx is a key. And that brings me to another problem about this game. And no, my issue isn't just where I'm in a room with a Sphinx. See, the issue that I had with this situation and kind of the last one was that the visuals were actually messing with me because of the version I'm playing. Tomb Raider Remastered has upgraded visuals, obviously. No doubt these graphics look great, especially looking at Laura's character model. She looks more like her CGI model than she ever did on the PlayStation 1. The team behind the remaster no doubt put in work when it comes to these graphics, but there are some mishaps. For starters, some areas are not as well lit as the original game. You can switch between the graphics at any time with a press of a button, and there were times where I switched not just to see the difference, but I actually did it so I could see where I was going. The original game had a short draw distance, so you might think it's darker, but that's just due to the technology of the time. It remains in the remaster if you're using the old school graphics, but overall I'll say that the original look was just more brighter. The dimness is not that bad with the new graphics, but I do think in some places they overdid it. Another small advantage using the classic look is the visibility of items. Items in the PlayStation 1 version were sprites and had a almost glow to them, making them stand out compared to the polygon environment. With the new graphics on, the items don't do this and they blend more into the environment, which does make it look more realistic, but it's just easier to see with the classic style on. The camera also works differently depending upon if you're using modern graphics or classic graphics. The camera is more zoomed out with the modern look, and you can control it a bit easier. However, the classic graphics has a subtle but important change with this camera that I wish was also in the modern option. The camera is placed almost at Laura's feet. By doing this, timing jumps was easier as I could visualize when to jump better. Core Design, the original developers behind Tomb Raider, really knew what they were doing here. See, like I said before, although a remaster can change things, not everything was a flaw to begin with and doesn't need rearranging. Sometimes changing things around could hurt the experience. Speaking of which, remember that Sphinx I told you about? The one with the key behind his head? What helped me even realize I could go behind this Sphinx was actually me switching to the classic graphics. Here, the edges of the Sphinx's face are more sharp, which allowed me to see and notice that I could drop down and shimmy over to another part of its body. The new graphics made its size look more rounded, so it kind of threw me off. With these few issues aside, I still primarily play with modern graphics. They just look too good to me. But I do have an appreciation for the classic look as well. This team went out their way to make these new pretty graphics, and I gotta say, overall they nailed it. They didn't half-step it either. Many levels have added extra details that funny enough give visual context to the game's well-lit rooms that the old school graphics just didn't have. Anytime I was in a well-lit room that clearly in the classic graphics design, these rooms would be pitch dark. If I switched to modern graphics, they would normally add some type of hole or opening to give context to why the light is even in here. and I thought that was pretty cool and a great thing that they added to the remaster. Tomb Raider boots up with a catchy tune, but as soon as you start your adventure, you'll realize something. Do you hear that? You notice anything? There's no music. Like, there's no music at all. Just the sounds of the environment, Laura's footsteps, and the rumblings of animals in the distance. This detail really feeds into the realism of the world, and it also feeds into a personality trait of Lara, as she is a loner. The lack of music actually provides tension to the game, and the silence actually gives me more time to think about my next move rather than me grooving out to a beat like other games. Now, that doesn't mean there's no music at all. During certain combat situations, the music ramps up. A jingle does play when you find secret areas, and when you reach a milestone in a level, you're rewarded with a song that feeds into the sense of discovery. Your guns sound fine overall. They have that movie or cartoon-like pews and pows like you'll find in a TV show. Animals can give off these creepy noises, letting you know that they're probably in your vicinity somewhere, and the sound of rushing water in the distance lets you know that Laura's about to get wet in a few minutes. I spoke about Laura's death screech. Something I forgot to mention is how the lack of music playing makes her deaths feel real. When you die, there is no death music, just the sound of her body collapsing or being shredded. And if you press nothing at all, you just kind of just sit there, lingering. Staring at our hero's cold, lifeless body. The silence really gives Tomb Raider a touch of a creepy and mysterious air about itself that you only found in games of this era. If you ever wonder why so many games of this time period had gamers using their imagination to create weird stories online, mysteries, secrets, and creepypastas, well, Tomb Raider will give you those vibes and that inspiration. Outside of RPGs, games in this era and time really didn't push stories that much. They focus on giving you more of a reason why things are happening rather than providing a memorable plot. Tomb Raider overall is no different. The story here is entertaining, but all it really does is just give you a narrative reason to keep going. After capturing Bigfoot of all things, Lara is approached by a man named Larson, who works for a woman named Jacqueline Natla. Miss Natla has a job for Lara, to find an ancient artifact called the Scion. Although she was offered money, Lara, our protagonist here, she doesn't do things for cash. No, she does it for the adventure. As Lara says,
I'm sorry, I only play for sport.
She's headed to Peru to find the Scion, and after our good friend Carlos passes away by the hands of some wolves, R.I.P. Carlos, she survives many different attempts on her life while exploring these ancient ruins, and then she discovers the Big Daddy, the tomb of Qualopec. Here she finds the Scion, but in classic Indiana Jones fashion, the place comes crumbling down. Lara barely escapes with her life, but as soon as she finds herself some safety, our good old buddy Larson here pops up and double crosses Lara. Lara wants some answers, so she heads to Jacqueline's office to find out why she betrayed her. Lara finds out that there's other pieces of the Scion, and they're somehow connected to Atlantis. 3 rulers, each with their own Scion. Now Lara already has one of the ruler Scions, but now she has to find the other 2. Jacqueline's notes point her in the direction of Greece, where she'll end up finding the tomb of Tehoken, another one of these rulers. Larson did mention that there's another guy out there named Pierre who is also sent to find the other pieces, and you'll be running into him quite a bit in these upcoming levels. As Lara fights her way through, she ends up in a Colosseum. Lara then finds a statue of King Midas in which she has to use the magic that it has in order to turn copper into gold to press on. If that's not wild enough for you, she then goes toe-to-toe with a powerful centaur. She then bumps into Pierre again, but this time will be the last, as after a vicious gun battle, Pierre finally takes that dirt nap that I've been wanting to give him. Lara then takes the Scion from Pierre and his 2 guns. She finds her way into the tomb of Tehoken, where she finds that both Tehoken and Qualopec are labeled as just rulers of Atlantis. She then sees a vision of monsters destroying Atlantis, and a 3rd ruler being sealed away after their Scion was confiscated from them and placed in Egypt, which leads Lara to her next destination. Following her vision, Lara finds herself in Khamum, She does her Tomb Raider thing and traverses through booby traps and wild beasts. She bumps into Larson again, but this time there's no mercy. She takes him out and escapes the tomb with the Scion. Only this time, Natla was waiting on Lara. Her and her goons strip her of her weapons and the Scion, and it's up to Lara to get them back. She chases after them in this badass bike scene, then sneaks her way into Natla's yacht, and hitches a ride to a mysterious island. Here, Lara must find her weapons and the Scion pieces and stop whatever's going on with Natla. Or if you're an idiot like me, you don't find your weapons, you run past all the enemies, and you make it to the end of the goal. But if you're smart, you'll actually find your pistols, defeat all the henchmen, get the Uzis, and complete the stage, leading you to the Great Pyramid of Atlantis. Here, all the nightmares of Lara's visions come true. Skinless monsters roam the halls, the walls are made of flesh, and death is around every corner. Lara ends up in a room with a strange creature that mimics her every move. Lara finds a throne room. There are 3 chairs inside and each have a letter, T, Q, and N. Lara finally finds a Scion, and touching it, she sees another vision. In this vision, it's revealed that Natla is the 3rd ruler of Atlantis. She's basically a crazy lady that wanted to create an army of mutants. Something about wanting to push human evolution or something. She was sealed away thousands of years ago, only to be freed accidentally by a nuclear explosion. After this vision, Natla finally confronts Lara. She tells Lara of her dream of evolving humans. After Lara listens to this crazy nonsense, she tries to destroy the Scion, but Natla falls to her death in order to stop her. Luckily, Lara ends up latching onto a ledge, and while pulling herself up, she now has to face one of the monstrosities that Natla created with her experiments. After defeating this beast, she ends up working her way back to the Scion and finally destroying it, which of course triggers a chain reaction which causes the pyramid to come crashing down. Lara must now escape before it's too late. After going through the pyramid once again, Lara ends up finding the exit, but not so fast, as Natla actually survives, but this time she shows her true form as an Atlantean and begins to fly around and shoot fire at Lara. Lara manages to defeat Natla for good this time, and after an intense battle, she escapes just in time. Not only did Lara have an amazing adventure, but seemingly she ended up saving the world in the process, making herself an accomplished adventurer, author, and now a heroine. Like I said before, the story serves as a vehicle to explain why Lara is going from location to location. As far as stories go, it's pretty simple, and the big plot twist is, well, not that shocking if you pay attention to what's going on. There are little details that tell you that Natla is really the villain of the game. I did enjoy the story overall though. The cutscenes were well done for the time, and the voice acting had that action movie cheese that I like. The only thing I wish they could have done is remade the cutscenes or at least up the brightness. I understand that would probably be more trouble than it's worth, but these scenes do look dark, right? It's not just me, they look really freaking dark. The colors look way better if you turn HDR off on your console, so I wouldn't advise playing with that on. There is oddly a filter you can use to make the footage look blurrier. I guess that this is supposed to be like the original game's resolution on PlayStation 1. Now, I have no idea why anybody would turn that on because it just makes it look worse. But I guess it's cool for anyone that wants to look at 480p visuals. In the end, this was Lara's first adventure that turned her into a cultural icon, and for that, I would say it's a story worth playing. Tomb Raider went on to be a commercial success. As of today, the first game went on to sell over 7 million copies, and it has been ported onto dang near every system known to man. I know people might think that that's not a lot, because we got games out here today that's cracking like 10 million copies sold in a short period of time, but you gotta remember, back when Tomb Raider released, this was a huge success. Tomb Raider is actually sitting pretty comfortably with a 91 on Metacritic, and that was during a time where reviewers were way more harsh than they are today. Tomb Raider has went on to expand itself beyond video games into other forms of media, making it a juggernaut of a franchise. Movies, comics, toys, no matter what you are into, most people probably know who Lara Croft is. A great character needs a great design. Every classic character has a look that's easily recognizable, and it's no secret that Lara Croft is a looker herself. Lara has been both praised and criticized for her design. Lara is a slim but athletic built woman. She's pretty tall, and if we're being honest, she's blessed in the chest, as I would say. She was inspired by Tank Girl and Nana Cherry, a musician from Sweden. Now wait a minute. Nana Cherry, Swedish mother, West African father. Wait a second. It's all making sense now. That face, those lips, the height, the ham. Lara Croft is black. This design is very 90s, and of course people would see the potential to explore a character this alluring. Despite what we've seen of Lara over the years, this was never the intention of the creator of Tomb Raider, Toby Gard. In fact, he left the company mainly due to them trying to push Lara as a sex symbol rather than a heroine. The funny thing is, I remember the biggest thing about Lara, no pun intended, were her pyramids at the time. She was always meant to have a comic book look to her anyway. Comic book characters normally have exaggerated bodies, so I get why they kept it, but I'm kind of shocked that Toby didn't see what might have sparked from this decision. For me, I do sympathize with the creator. Nobody wants their creation to be misused, but one thing I learned when it comes to art is for the people. If you decide to create some art and put it into the world, you cannot control what someone does with it once it's out in the ether. But the funny thing is, Lara being a sex symbol, a lot of times it was just for the advertisement. She really wasn't that in the game. Her impact on women and men have stuck with her over the years. And still, Lara is to be looked at as a hero first and foremost before anything. Just last year, we had a game by the name of Stellar Blade. A game I love, but let's keep it a buck. Eve was made for one reason only, and guess what? It worked. Now, I'm probably in the 1% when it comes to Eve. Eve to me is clearly a sexual character, but she's not only that. She's strong, independent, heroic, and at times can be understanding and compassionate. Most people I hear discussing Eve and how much they like her clearly didn't play the game or pay attention to it, because the way they describe her personality really doesn't match what you get in game. Look, man, with all the online discourse, I've heard some crazy things over the years. We want feminine characters, nice and soft spoken. We already deal with boss chicks in our real life. We don't want that in our games. That's why we love Eve. Look, I understand it's 2025, and many people are chronically online and are being manipulated by grifters that play on deeper issues people are facing internally and are using gaming as an outlet to spew their frustrations that really won't get solved until they do some deep introspection. But this description of Eve is like where, dog? Like, what game did you play? She doesn't do any of those things that you're talking about from her personality standpoint. She's not any of those things. I love Eve, but her hypersexual design is why many people see her superficially. Lara, despite the pinups, sexy outfits, and the infamous nude code rumor, she has kept her crown as the greatest female video game character of all time because she's more than that. Toby wanted Lara to be a positive role model for women and wanted men to have some form of an attachment to her. He didn't envision this type of attachment, but I would blame that on naivete to anything. Both the vision Toby had and the vision that the advertisers had are both seen today in Lara, but I will say one is more dominant, and that is her original concept of being a hero. It's funny people who claim that Lara has gone woke over the years and use the first game as the ideal version of Lara Croft. Lara Croft in the first game would be considered a boss chick today, and with the recent discovery of her African roots, you all might say she's a DEI hire. But you know what? With the success of Tomb Raider as a franchise and how beloved the character is, maybe boss chicks are marketable, people. I don't know, it's just a thought. Outside of Lara's sex appeal, her design actually has purpose through gameplay. Now, I'm not saying that this was intentional by the developers. This is something that I picked up on my own as I played, so this is all my own interpretation. Lara wears her iconic tank top, shorts, and boots, all practical for exploring and being agile. Her exposed legs play a role when you platform. Seeing her flip around is cool and all, but by seeing the mechanics of her jumping adds to the realism of the character. You can actually see like her legs bending and stuff as detailed as it was possible for back then in the PlayStation 1 era. Her arms are also exposed. Now, when you think of classic male action heroes, ones that typically tote around guns, they typically have their arms exposed and they're also wearing tank tops. Let's call it guns on guns, if you will. Lara is simply following the design of the classic action heroes that came before her. Again, in comparison to Eve, disclaimer, I do like Eve as a character and her design, But if we being real, like, what is she based off of? She's like half naked the whole time. What is she? What is she following the footsteps of a newborn? Your drunk uncle? Like, she's naked. Let's be real. She's not supposed to be. Technically, she's not naked. She's naked. In the end, whether you love her or hate her, Lara Croft is a video game icon. She has the attitude and that look that is universally loved. Well, at least by most people. She has the balance of being a strong, independent woman while boasting a brave personality, all the while doing it with style. Her independent nature comes off as just that, independent and independent only, and not as some type of anger or attack against males. Now, sure, she's done some things in the past that are kind of, out there, but it never took away from her being a hero, her heroine status. When you think of Lara Croft, you think of hero. All the other sexual stuff kind of is like past tense. It's in the background. And even during the time where it was pushed, that was just never the look. It was almost kind of like some naughty thing that like the developers did, or so we thought the developers did, just to push the game. But when we played Tomb Raider, or when we thought of Tomb Raider, I never heard anyone look at Lara Croft that way. And it's actually pretty impressive that during the 90s of all time periods, that didn't stick as her leading factor. Now, when you think of more recent female leads in games, what do you think of them? Sure, all of them are heroic. They do crazy cool things, but outside of maybe Aloy, a lot of them, unfortunately, are sex appeal first, hero second. And the ones that come off as heroes first, they almost come off robotic and lifeless, or they think that to be a female hero, they can't be just as enjoyable as a male hero character. Lara Croft doesn't have any of those issues. She doesn't have modern day problems and modern day issues. She's a character of the 90s, of a bygone era, where people may have had ideas to push agendas that were positive in order to make young girls feel comfortable in the gaming market, versus making content that they think will irritate other people and just annoy certain people in the gaming community as a whole. Which is why, in my eyes, Lara Croft still holds the crown as one of, if not the greatest, female video game heroes of all time. And even though we've had plenty of new female characters come, and we're going to keep having them, and I enjoy a lot of them. One of my favorite ones was Frey from Forspoken. But a lot of these characters just can't compete with Lara, because Lara was from a time period where it was about the story and the character and not the agenda. After 28 years, I finally got to play one of the greatest games of the 5th generation. Tomb Raider still holds up after all these years, and although the remastered version isn't as remastered as I would have liked, I would still say it's the best way to play an all-time classic on modern hardware. There really isn't anything major to complain about. Everything about Tomb Raider is solid, from its challenging gameplay, fun story, well-designed levels, and its satisfying learning curve. I loved every moment of it. I do know for most people today, tank controls, old graphics, and a game that doesn't hold your hand may piss you off beyond belief, but I think this relic is worth giving a chance. Like, take it from me. I grew up with tank controls when they were the norm, and I hated them since then. But it wasn't until I played Resident Evil 4 that I began to at least tolerate them, because in that game it wasn't so bad. But even then, I didn't get what the purpose of them were other than limitations of the hardware. After all these years, Tomb Raider finally showed me how viable tank controls are and how they can provide a unique game experience that you can't get anywhere else. I hope everyone, young and old, tries Tomb Raider. Sometimes to know where you're going, you have to look backwards. Great games last forever, in my opinion. Time doesn't define them. And if you ever find yourself wanting something new, in this cookie cutter industry we have today, sometimes you might have to go pick up something old.